Dane look big in this? Hey, what's up? I'm Nicker35. I'm a surf journalist from the Gold Coast, and you're listening and or watching to the Skegcast. Welcome back. Well, not welcome back at all, because this is my first episode of the Skegcast. And I don't know if I chose wisely with this first person, because he's a professional podcaster, which is a bit of a nightmare, and even more daunting with my imposter syndrome, which is something that we talk about in this podcast. I caught up with the legendary surf journalist, pro surfer and author Jamie Brisick, and we talked all things his life, which is incredible, and also a documentary that we've been working on together for the last 12 years called The Life and Death of Westerly, Windina. A compelling conversation. We got to hang out in the Malibu parking lot, which is a place that's really close to his heart, and I'm really excited for you to check it out, so have a look. Good to go, man. Wow, here he comes. He's got a sick hat on too. Gosh, that's a nice hat.
Oh yeah, well I had one of these skin ailments. Toss her in the back is good. I had one of these skin ailments. Call it carcinoma or something of that sort. So I had to put some cream on to remove this thing.
Okay.
So it made me conscious of. So on the wide brim hat tip.
Yeah, nice.
Super wide brim.
Fucking 100. It's
getting in the way, wide brim.
It might not be able to see your face, is that anything?
Exactly.
Mate, thank you very much for doing this. It's so nice to see you.
Likewise, Nika.
This is a real treat, man.
No, what a thrill. We've been through stuff together. Wow.
I thought about it a lot on the flight over, and we've been through so much stuff.
Wow.
What are we doing right now? We're leaving your place in the Boo.
So we're in Point Doom, and we're going to head down to Malibu First Point. And the waves will be flat, so the expectations are low on that front, but we'll just kind of do a surf check if you like that idea.
I love that idea. And true to form, it looks like the blue skies are going to come out.
Yes.
It will, in fact, burn off.
Yeah. It looks like it's happening right now.
Yeah, it's so good.
The sea's parting, the sky's parting.
Fuck yeah. So this is your homeland. This is where you grew up.
It is. Well, not here. I will clarify. We're surrounded by $10 to $20 million homes. And to borrow the Australian expression, I am living a champagne life on a beer budget.
Fucking oath.
So I kind of, I live in this neighborhood that I maybe have no right to live in, but it's wonderful, and I love it very much. But so we're in Point Doom. I grew up on the other side of the hill in what is known as maybe the West Valley, Agora Hills.
Uh-huh.
So I was an inlander, and when I was really young, I learned how to lie and say that I actually did live in Malibu or Santa Monica or Venice, where, depending on where I was, like skateboarding when I was 10, 11 years old, because it was that territorial.
Yeah, okay. Like to go surf.
Yes, well, skateboarding especially, because I skated like some of the Dogtown places that had real hardcore locals.
Yeah.
But yeah, you wanted to blend in, and being from the valley was like the most uncool thing possible. So I learned how to overcompensate, and I also think it made me try harder.
To fit in.
Yeah, it was like, okay, if you live in the wrong place, the one way to make up for it is skate hard or surf hard.
And be good. Did
yes.
skating make you surf? Like you skated
yes.
first?
Skated first. I had an older cousin who was deep into skateboarding and surfing, and he got a skateboarding, and that style, this was the mid to late 70s, was such surf simulation. I mean, I was ducking and pretending I was in a tube, skateboarding down the sidewalk under like a hedge of trees, without knowing that I was actually pretending to be in the tube, because I'd never been in the water on a surfboard, but I just was doing what everyone else was doing.
Okay.
And so when I started surfing, it was sort of already there in many ways in the lines you were drawing. It might be different if you learned to skate now and you were doing flip tricks and ollies and things that were like
Fully.
You can't do on a surfboard, but back then it was really just the same style.
And so did you just start competing early on? Did you do the junior rounds?
I did.
My first encounter with competitive surfing was in 1979. There was the Sunkist Pro at Malibu, which was won by Buttons Kaluhio Kalani.
No way.
And he was doing 360s and switch stance moves, and it was this really dynamic surfing that was different to the kind of laid back, cool, maybe marijuana and Quaaludes inspired surfing of the crew that I grew up with or looked up to, I should say.
Yeah.
So there was like this casualness and style consciousness, and then suddenly there was this like competitive style that was very dynamic and pyrotechnical that Buttons and Dane K. Aloha and all the Town and Country team brought. And I saw that, and then I started competing, and then I went up the ranks in what felt like a long time, but looking back now, it was just over a few years. I think I started when I was 14, and then when I was 19, I turned pro. So 5 years of amateurs, and then went to Australia for the first time.
And what does turning pro mean back then?
Probably making your parents very upset that you're not going to college. There was that, and also like, is this a like viable career path? Come on, like it's felt like you're really just, it's like a way of dropping out of society or like not being legitimate. But it's interesting because I feel like I really like rose with the legitimacy of competitive professional surfing. I rose right in time with, because I think when I started to chase it, it was like you'd get a maybe very small salary or maybe a couple plane tickets from your sponsor, and by the time I stepped off it, there was like, during the time I was on tour, Tom Carroll signed the first $1 million contract, right. And granted that was over 5 years, so it was like $200K a year or something.
Huge though at the time.
But yeah, giant leaps forward for professional surfing. But for me, as someone who ranked in the mid 40s for most of their career, it was like subsisting on, 12 grand a year, selling some boards on the side of the contest afterwards to pay your hotel bill because you didn't win the $300 prize money. It was really hand to mouth. But it was all this adventure, and I think at the time,
amazing.
It was like, I look back and I can't believe the experience I got. And I will say this, like there's big money now, and there's, an entourage of people and managers and coaches and all that kind of stuff. Back then it was very much like you were just sort of winging it around the world, and you were getting this experience. And because the stakes were so low and there wasn't big money to be made, you kind of threw yourself into the adventure a lot more. And you partied more, and you went out wherever you were, and you met the locals, and you hung out with them, and you made new friends. And yes, we were trying to win. We were trying to stay focused and win all the contests. But the moment you lost out, it was like, okay, time to just immerse in the place you were, where you were at, and have a lot of fun. And so it was incredibly fun. And I think at the time, I was trying to stay focused on winning contests. When I look back now, what I was doing is getting this interesting education of kind of a lot of travel and learning how to be adaptable and almost like chameleon-like in the sense of like wherever you are, you just flow with it all. When in Rome kind of thing.
Totally.
Which I'm so grateful for because, I don't know, it's nice to be adaptable in that way.
100%, and I was thinking about this on the way over, but you also got to be in that time. You got to be a surfer during those times where there was probably less rules from sponsors.
Yes.
And it was probably more accepted to have fun.
Yeah.
And be the anarchists out there doing it.
Absolutely. But the thing is we didn't know that at the time. I mean, at the time it was really just, it was sort of this, we were trying to make it legitimate, so there was almost like a responsibility to sort of there was like surfing was trying to aim towards golf or tennis, and it was using that as a model of what it could be. And there were a lot of promoters of the sport who were very ambitious. I question all that, quite frankly. I think about it and I'm like, surfing was absolutely great the way it was, and the only thing that made it need to be something else is the desire to make money from it, really.
Yeah.
It was like capitalist interest was what took it away from being its kind of weird marginal society, countercultural, outcast, etc. Community, which was just so damn fun, and it's definitely more vanilla now than it used to be.
And what would be your highest achievements in surfing from sort of a rankings point of view? Was there a year that you did the best?
Yeah, well, I think so. I had 2 semi-final berths. I had 2 thirds, one in Brazil and one in South Africa. And both of them were like in what would be like world tour events now. So there were big moments for me. And I think the thing that And then at the end of the year, I always ranked in the 40s, but there were times when I was ranked 23 in the world for a couple months, and then I fell down.
Awesome.
But I think the thing that I got from those little moments was, the word manifesting is used often now, and back then we called it creatively visualizing. There was a book that kind of came from like the yoga, Eastern philosophy, or kind of Eastern mysticism world, which was creative visualization by the author was Shakti Gawain. And it was about like visualizing what you wanted for yourself. And I'm so happy to have been exposed to that as like a young aspiring athlete, because it was this thing of like, it was like imagining the Superman within coming out, like imagining this higher self emerging and taking over and that being your life. It was really creative. It's funny because I think about it, in some ways it was very much like we were just jocks and we were one-dimensional in our focus. But when you're trying to like win a contest, what you're trying to do is like give birth to this new self that is like the ideal self. And now being a writer, I realize it's very, very creative. So the 1/3 in Brazil, I'd visualized so clearly what it would feel like to win the event, down to like, getting chaired up the beach and holding up the oversized check and getting the champagne spilled over my head, and what that would mean to my life. And I kept extending it to like, this is going to get me money from my sponsors. I'll get ranked in the top 30, which is being in like the top 44 or 42 or whatever it is right now, where you're earning money. All that stuff drove me so much. And getting little glimpses of it was almost the whole point. Like, I feel like even though I didn't win that particular event, the 1987, maybe 88 Sundeck Pro in Brazil, Ubatuba, Brazil, I got such a clear image of myself winning it. It was almost like a vicarious feeling.
Crazy.
Of it. Yeah.
That's amazing.
Yeah.
And then when you finished surfing, growing up, were you academic as a kid?
No, my dad was very academic. He was a publisher's representative, which meant he sold textbooks to all the university professors around Greater Los Angeles. So all the kind of like being intellectually curious was very important to my dad, and he always encouraged that at home, and he always gave me books. But I really wasn't. I think I was more of just like I had discipline via competitive surfing, which is like, as fun as surfing may sound, when you really channel yourself towards contests, it does require discipline, and it certainly did at that time, because all my friends were getting stoned and getting drunk and going to high school parties and chasing girls, and I was kind of doing all of that, but also had this other side that I was really focused on. But I had the discipline, but no, I think I was just curious about people, and I did read, and in a naive way, I was taking in all this stuff, and traveling was really my way of opening up to that. My college. And long plane flights, which are like overrated or under-recognized, as an incredible place to find an interior life. Because when you just got off a plane from Australia, when you sit on a plane for 12 hours straight, you go to new places inside yourself. And then when you land in a foreign place where you don't know people, and the phone's not going to ring, and no one's going to distract you, you sort of go inward. And I think that I did a lot of that, and that was what made me, when I was done being a pro surfer, be really interested in kind of just art in general, and music and visual art and writing in particular. But like I was drawn to creative people, and then I sort of, in a very, again, naive way, and kind of coming to it later, because I was 25 when I stopped being a pro, I was just determined to write and read everything I could. And I felt like the blinders had been on as a competitive athlete, and once I realized I didn't need to compete anymore and try to be this sort of jock, I could be open to everything and everyone. And I was living in Sydney at the time, and Sydney was a perfect city to just sort of throw myself into the night and just meet everyone.
Totally.
And I actually had a car, but I would hitchhike everywhere just because I love the idea of getting in a car with someone I didn't know and and getting to know them and chatting with them.
It's unbelievable. It's like the intrigue in you is what's kind of driven it.
Totally, and admittedly, there was a time when I probably would have been hiding this. Now I can very openly say, because I'm more comfortable with myself and where I'm at in my life. But what I had was like just naive curiosity. I didn't learn it at Harvard. I didn't learn it at Yale. It didn't come from university professors. It wasn't academic. It was very just kind of bumbling around, naive, but also like very curious and open. And honestly, and we're about to pull into Malibu, growing up at Malibu was great that way because it was a city beach and it was so diverse. And so, I mean, diverse to the extent that a beach can be diverse.
Yeah.
You know, there's someone that stays up all night in Hell's Kitchen in New York that would say that's not diverse. But as far as a surfing life goes, the cross section of people, the kind of all ends of the socioeconomic strata all gathered on the beach, and it created a real open-mindedness. And where some of my surfing peers from that era might have been homophobic, that was definitely not like. No, that I learned to be very open to people, or even some of them were racist, and I was around, a lot of colors, and so I'm grateful for that.
Absolutely. And then you go into writing.
Yeah.
And was the transition into writing in surfing an easy thing? You know, did you have formats? Did you understand how to write?
I was writing. I had a lot of prose chops to work on, but what I did have was a backdoor entry into the magazines, and that was because I'd been a good surfer.
Yep.
And I'm always grateful to Andrew Kidman, who lives in northern New South Wales. At the time, he was the editor of Waves. I was off the tour, freshly off the tour, and the thing about being a pro surfer is it's real inflated self-importance. You think you're badass,
Totally.
and that's what you're supposed to do. You're supposed to tell yourself how badass you are, but you realize that, like, once you get out of the surf bubble, no one gives a shit. And so I thought I had this self-importance, and I had the privilege of my self-expression was related to, like, flying across a wave, which is, wow, what a great thing. It's creative and it's athletic, and built into it is sunshine and physical health and etc. So I knew surfing well, and Andrew kind of gave me a start at Waves magazine and let me write pieces, and I worked as the associate editor, but I also wrote a lot of pieces for the magazine, and I had a lot to learn in terms of what the technique of writing, but I did know my subject matter very, very well firsthand. Yeah. So I went from kind of being in the magazine as a surfer to being behind the scenes of the magazine, going out and interviewing fellow surfers and being able to talk to them in a way that they probably were glad, because I was like, a year earlier I was on tour with them.
You're a peer.
Yeah.
Yeah, and how did it, were you well received? I guess you were well received by everyone then, because you, like you say, you were just there with them.
I was well received. I will say, I didn't know this, and I didn't have the kind of self-knowledge at the time, but I do think I was like, my ego was a little fragile, because it was weird to be, there was probably at times a part of me that was like, I wish I were still one of the surf gods. Now I'm in the end zone, or I'm in the behind the scenes guy, with a microphone up to them, and occasionally when some of them would throw a little ego my way, like a little like I'll get to you later, it kind of crushed me, because I was like, don't you know who I am? I was there a year ago with you.
You would have been watching heats going, fuck, I probably could have got that. Could have got that.
That was at work, and that was, but it didn't take long before I was like, okay, I got to get over that, because, and I think, again, curiosity worked to my favor, because my curiosity overrode it all, and I was like, I'm actually genuinely concerned to see how these people work.
Yeah.
I think we have to pay for parking here.
Oh, all right. Well, we're just pulling up at the Malibu parking lot.
Hello. Nice to see you.
You too.
Just one? Is it okay to pay with a credit card?
Yes, sir.
It's turned into an absolutely beautiful day. I forgot how much I love this place.
Thank you very much. You too.
It's so nice.
I know, it's so much fun.
Fucking nice, man.
Yeah, it's one of the,
It's the most beautiful joint.
My friend Trace Marshall, whose van might be right there, calls this the greatest place on earth, and there are times when I think he's absolutely right.
Yeah. You have a love-hate with this place, though, eh?
Yeah, well, it was a love-hate, and there was a time when I felt like I was like getting stuck in this place. It was like thick mud that was like keeping me from being able to move. But I've spent so many years here that I now really love it, and I think I moved away for many, many years, and so I think I had to like just make sure I could live outside of it. It's almost like living in your folks' house, where it's like you might have great parents and you might have nothing but love and good home-cooked meals and a comfortable bedroom, but you kind of have to go out just to make sure that you can know that you can leave it.
Yep.
I kind of had that with Malibu, and then I lived in New York for about a decade, and then when I moved back, and it was a very emotional time for me, I completely made friends with it, and so now it's more just pure love.
Yeah.
But as my friend Charlie Smith says, you start hanging out in the Malibu parking lot, and you become the Malibu parking lot.
It's a nice spot, mate. How did you get your surfing fix when you're in New York for so long?
I moved to New York to get away from surfing on some level. I'd been the editor of Surfing Magazine, so my thing with Waves, I started as the associate editor, really loved the idea of documenting surfing and writing about surfing, and worked for and then moved back to LA. I was living in Sydney for about 2.5, 3 years. Moved back to LA, lived in Venice Beach, and then started working with Surfing Magazine. Became one of the staff writers, then became the editor. Did that for 2 years, and when I was done, I was like, I need to just get away from surfing. So I moved to New York with the hope of kind of starting a new life, and maybe like I had ambitions that maybe weren't realized, although they were naive ambitions, which is like I'm going to go and break into the New York writing world, whatever that means.
Yep.
And I realized that, I don't have the education. I've got a certain niche that I can fill. There's a certain world that I know well, but there's a lot I don't know. And better to let the poli-sci graduates from Harvard be the political writers at the New Yorker than myself, because I can't compete with that. So surfing sort of followed me, and while I was in New York, I was writing about a lot of surfing things, which was so weird. I was living like in this very urban place, and I'd be sitting there writing about the North Shore of Oahu. And I was like, oh, I'm looking at concrete high-rises, and meanwhile I'm writing about like these beaches with these waves breaking. But what ended up happening is surfers find surfers. So I met a guy, Thad Zolkowski, who's also a writer and has written some really great books. And he ran the writing department at Pratt Institute in Brooklyn. He and I became friends. I wanted to learn about writing. He said, you can audit some of my classes. So I would go to Brooklyn, go to Pratt, sit in on his classes and be studious. And then the weekend would roll around and he'd say, there's a swell in New Jersey, let's hit it. And we'd go surfing.
Epic.
And I did that. Chris Gentile from Pilgrim, who was also in Brooklyn. He's one of my dear, dear friends. Same thing. So I found surfers. So I did get a fix, but I also learned how to not do it. I learned how to not surf for months at a time, which I think was good.
Be it.
And and learn how not to be such a junkie with it all.
Yeah.
I got deeper into yoga. Walking around New York was really interesting. I remember realizing that I'd grown up with such nature, obviously the ocean, living in Malibu, the mountains are right here too. And when I moved to New York, it was all concrete and streets and high-rises and sirens and taxis. And I remember as I would take walks every afternoon, I remember thinking, human beings are nature. And there's the fellow heartbeats on the street, and the energy that transmits between humans is like its own form of nature, and it's feeding
cool.
on that level. Do you want me to crack your window?
Yeah, crack her out. We pulled up in the lot, and she's a bit...
We're hanging in the
lot.
lot.
And it's fucking summertime. Yeah, I mean, New York was a hard... You kind of tapped on it before, but it was a hard time for you as well.
Yes.
One of the hardest times of your life, maybe.
Yep. Well, it started great. So I moved to New York primarily to write more seriously and not to have the distraction of surfing, and to some extent the place where we're at right now, thus the love-hate at the time. And so I moved to New York to just kind of lock myself down and read and write. And I realized it was like a self-education where I just vowed to do a lot of writing and do a lot of reading. And I had a thing where I was sort of making goals for myself to read these books that I knew I had to read. And I did a reasonably good job of it. But not long after moving to New York, I met my late wife, Gisela, from Sao Paulo. And she was traveling on her way to go live in Europe, and we met and we really fell in love and realized we wanted to be together. So we were married. We were together for 11 years, all up, married for 9 years, but she died suddenly in a bicycle accident in 2013. Yeah, and we weren't together at the time, which made it even more complicated. So we were in a real tough time. So yeah, that crushed me beyond. And what I did with that is I moved back to LA to be closer to family and to be and to find surfing again, which I didn't know was going to happen. But in my kind of grief and just nothing felt good to me. Good friends, Alan White, who you know, and we worked together on the Westerly film, was really looked after me, and he was a mad keen surfer, and so every afternoon he'd be like, let's get in the water, and I would be, probably if I were left to my own devices I would not have, and he'd be like, let's get in the water, and then I'd go surfing, and then I'd realize actually surfing feels so damn good. And so the thing that I've come to realize is that I think the same way surfing saved me when I was like a misfitted hormonal teenager, or and it gave me this thing I could kind of hold myself together with and buttress me up in all the anxiety of just finding yourself and identity, I suppose. It came to me again later in life, in my mid-40s, in deep grief and feeling like nothing in the world feels good and I'm not sure I even want to be here. And then like going in the ocean and just having that light joy that we get. And so I, in a weird way that I would not wish upon anyone, but I feel like I was road tested. My love of surfing was road tested.
Absolutely.
Cruelly.
In the hardest way.
Yep.
Oh my God.
Yeah.
I don't know how you get over that kind of stuff.
Yeah.
As I remember it going down.
Yeah.
Fucking hell. What is it about surfing that you think, for people who surf in all walks of life, what is it that makes people so happy with surfing? What is the deep love?
It's like there's so many layers to it, because I think the one thing, and now we have like science to prove it, but there's like the negative ions that come off the ocean, and and it's so unfortunate that it's called negative ions, because it almost connotes the wrong thing, but It's in fact like all about happiness and positivity. And so there's that. And so you don't even have to surf to get that. Like if you walk along the shoreline, or if you swim in body surf or just dunk in the ocean, you're going to get that. But I think like what I experienced, what was really interesting is when I was kind of like coming out of my grief and my loss and my pain, Chad Marshall, the Marshall brothers, who spend a lot of time here at Malibu, Trace and Chad Marshall. Chad, I wanted a longer board because I'd ridden shortboards, and the waves were shitty a lot of the time, so I wanted to play with a longer board. And Chad sold me for very cheap a Scott Anderson longboard meth model that had a big single fin and then 2 side bites. And then I was watching what Derek Hine was doing with the finless stuff at the time, the free friction stuff, as Derek calls it. And I decided to take out the center fin, so I had these 2 tiny little side bites, and so I was getting all the side slip. And I swear to you, Nick, like in that time where I felt so heavy, or not heavy is probably the wrong word, more hollowed out. Like the feeling, the like hole in me of losing Gisela was so huge. And getting on a wave, and I didn't plan this, but getting on a wave with a board that didn't have a lot of grab from the fins, it just had these 2 tiny things, so there was all this drift and side slip. The side slip was like, it was like laughter coursing through my stomach. Like it was just like this giddy light feeling. And that was like, oh my God, this is like this 2-second little thing that I will get by pedaling out and getting that one moment of getting in the trim line and kind of like going for a slide, like almost like snowboarding down a hill where you're going sideways, was the best feeling to me. And I kept coming back. So when you ask like, what is it with surfing? I think for a newcomer to it, maybe just simply like drifting along on the wave.
On an open wall.
Yes.
Yeah.
But, and we're in a very appropriate place to say this, is it's like the community is incredible. Mm-hmm. And I think in my experience, I certainly felt this when I lived in New York, is there would be times when I'd like work hard through the week and wake up on a Saturday morning and be like, okay, I'm not going to work now because I've done an honest week's work. And now I want to have fun and I want to feel all the good things that we want to feel. And I would suddenly go, where's my community? And what I didn't realize is, as a surfer growing up in LA and on the coastline, is there's a built-in community at pretty much any beach where there's a wave.
Right.
And you know it well on the Goldie, like you have your mates and you have your friends, and you don't have to call or text them. They're just there.
You know they're going to be there.
You know they're going to be there, and like the better the waves, the more of them are there.
Yep.
So that part of it, I think, if I bring, say, my girlfriend, which I did a week ago, here to see this scene, and there's this weird shorthand among us surfers. And it's not even, sometimes it doesn't even involve eye contact. It's like we're just standing side by side looking at the waves when we say something. It's such a unique thing, and I think we don't even realize how unique it is. And I sometimes will try to see it through the lens of someone new to it. So there's the getting in the water, all that is like an incredible draw. It feels so damn good. You're not on a team, you're not relying on anyone. If it were a tennis game, you might rally, but then suddenly you're going to go, let's play a game. And then like one person walks off the court a winner, the other person walks off the court a loser. None of that's out there. We just go out and we just sort of dance around and frolic around, and we come in without that kind of thing there's enough of that in the world for us. It's nice to not have a winner or a loser.
Totally.
So yeah, that's
The community thing's really cool, and that's something I hadn't thought about. Like, I do that, going to check the surf every morning on the Gold Coast. I've now got all these mates. I don't know what their names are,
Yep.
but I see them all the time.
Yeah.
And they're the same people, and people are really habitual early.
Yeah.
It's
for sure.
crazy.
Yep.
Actually, talking about Mark Matthews, he takes his daughter to this cafe. I know he's going to be there,
Uh-huh.
and I know this old boy's going to be there, and he does these weird push-ups. They're not even surfing, but they're just like beach culture people.
Yeah.
Yeah, that's really interesting because I sort of was thinking along the lines of just about being in the water and the negative ion thing and the feeling of the water, but the community thing's really cool.
It
and
really
so
is.
true. Yeah, and I feel like maybe all of your travel, and I wonder, being in New York, whether you were so accepting of all kinds of people, which kind of is where I'm bridging into how you found the story of Westerly
Uh-huh.
and why you were so intrigued by it.
Yeah.
And how did you find the story? And can you kind of recount the first time you ever heard about it?
Yes, for sure. So I think, so in 2009, I was going to Australia with my late wife. She'd never been to Australia, so I was so excited to see her. And as a sort of lifelong journalist, writer, there's always been this, like, the work pleasure are almost one and the same in many ways. So anywhere I'm traveling, I'm like, I should write a story while I'm there. And in some ways, it's almost like a deeper immersion into that place, whether it's a travel type piece or whether it's a profile of someone who lives there. It's like a conduit to connecting more with that place.
Mm-hmm.
So I was going to Australia for a month with my wife, and I asked Scott Hewlett, who was the editor of the Surfers Journal at the time, any stories that I might cover while in Australia. And he said, yes, Peter Druin's living as a woman. That could be an interesting story. I didn't know about this. So I started poking around, and then I found a piece about Westerly, Windina. Peter Druin transitioned into Westerly, Windina. And then Derek Riley of Beach Grit had known Peter/Westerly's contact, passed it along to me, and I called up Westerly, and I said, I'm going to be in Australia. I would love to write a profile of you. Could we have lunch? And Westerly said, sure. So that's how it all started. But what I will say is, and so I met Westerly. We had a wonderful conversation. Westerly was talking all about her transition. Mm-hmm. And I think what I was really into, and this, again, I can draw this back to Malibu, is like growing up on this beach, I was exposed to a lot to the extent that you can be exposed to a lot on a beach. And that is, I had friends who lived in the Malibu colony, and their parents were some of the most powerful people in Hollywood. And they would invite me over for a sandwich in their, beachfront $10 million house. This is back in the 80s. And then, similarly, I'd like spending long days on the beach in my teens. There would be folks who are homeless, and they live and they get their food from the trash can behind the supermarket, and they lived up in the bushes, and we knew them on a first name basis, and we didn't think of them as like, oh, they're the weirdos and we can't talk to them. We were so open to them, and I'm grateful. Just somehow my peer group just had that.
Yeah.
And so when I met Westerly, and I realized, I'd known for a long time how narrow-minded surfers can be. And as someone that often felt a little bit like a weirdo in the surf community, because it's different now than what it was, but I think there was a time when I might have been like, I don't know, whatever. I came from more of an urban upbringing. I was maybe, I won't say this about myself, but people have said, you're more in touch with your feminine side, you're not a macho fuck.
Yeah.
And I was
Cosmo.
Yeah, and yeah, exactly.
Yeah.
And back then that might have been a weirdo thing. So I would,
sure.
and then in my like natural desire to try to fit in and not knowing myself, I think, is there something wrong with me? So when I met Westerly and saw this story, I was like, this is one I could get behind, because in many ways I got my own little axe to grind against the narrowness, not just of surfing. And it's like, it's unfair for me because the thing that drew me to surfing was what a diverse group it was. But I also felt like once I was in the competitive community, it was a little bit of a boys' club, and there was things of like, there was homophobia for sure. There was total transphobia. There were people like, oh, this fucking freak's gonna get her dick cut off.
Oh, totally.
And it was so offensive. And so I was like, I'm on your team, Westerly, because I believe in you genuinely, and in the purest way, as having gotten to know Westerly. But also, I'm championing the underdog here because it sucks that it's not a kinder, more open-minded, inclusive community.
Yeah.
So that's how it started.
Did you ever think that 11 years or more later, you'd be talking about a movie that you've produced?
Well, you know, it's
been a wild ride, hey?
It's been a wild ride, and we've been on it together.
Yeah, we have.
Yes. And for the listener, you may say this in your intro, but I mean, we started. We were working on this project, and we went to Bangkok with Westerly for her gender reassignment surgery.
I'm getting goosebumps just thinking about it, mate. To be honest.
Yeah. No, we've been through a lot.
We've talked a lot in cars.
We certainly have.
Yeah.
But I think I didn't know it was going to take so long. But anyway, so I'd written a couple of profiles of Westerly, and then Alan White, the Australian director, and I were friends, and we were working on some projects. And then he and I talked about the idea of let's pair up and let's work on a documentary about Westerly. And Peter was up for it. Westerly was up for it, and we embarked on this long project. And you were involved with it the whole way too.
Some of the most amazing things I've ever seen.
Yeah, and I think I had no idea. I mean, I think in some ways, the interesting thing, and I will say this almost parallels my surf community, and this is being totally honest, I'm an ambitious fucker. Yeah. I was hoping to do something that could make a splash and lead to more opportunities.
Totally.
So I was thinking like, let's make this doc, and then it'll be done in 2 years, and then what's next? What next doc will I do?
Yeah.
It was way tougher than that, as these things so often are. Mm-hmm. But what I will say is, having lived through a lot, because when I started the project, I was happily married and living comfortably in New York with my wife, and along the way my wife dies, and so I went through all that, and I was happy to be in a group of folks where there was a lot of understanding and compassion, and we weren't... It may have been different if we were doing a documentary about some star athlete who's never went through anything deep emotional.
Any trial or tribulation style.
Yes, yeah. But we were immersed in trial and tribulation. And it was like we were in a recovery group sitting in folding chairs in a circle together, sharing our stories. So when my wife died, it was like, oh, Westerly was incredibly good to me. And I was like, oh, okay, this was no coincidence that this person should come into my life, because as I'm going through the worst thing, I don't know if we were making the doc about a jock who was insensitive or unkind, or just a real opportunistic. But no, Westerly was someone who understood the hard knocks of life very deeply. So I think to get back to, like, while I may have started with personal ambitions and a genuine interest in genuine empathy,
incredible story, which was timely at the time with everything that was going on.
Yes, and I love the idea, because so many of my writing heroes and photojournalist heroes, they were about like jumping into otherness. You know, they would like find something, and then that's unfamiliar to them, that's out of their comfort zone, to use the popular phrasing. And then they would immerse in this thing for a year or 2 years, and then come out of it, and they would be richer for it. And so the idea of like following Westerly around as they go through this highly emotional period of their lives, i.e. gender transition, I was so open for it. And it became a learning experience. So I'd never imagined it would be 11 years later. I kind of had ambitions for myself, for sure, that didn't come to fruition, but it enriched me as a person in ways that may be less tangible on paper, but is visible in my life and the people in my life who I love and I feel lucky for.
And I totally get it. And I didn't have quite as deeper involvement in the movie, but with the pivotal moments that we had, like going to Thailand and stuff, I'm excited for the movie to come out now, just so people can see what we did.
Yes,
because it's hard to believe.
Yes.
And you know what I loved about the latest edit, which I don't know if the shot was in it the original time, but I've told this story a million times, is like the hospital we went to after the first rejection, the nurses had rollerblades on.
Yes.
And that shit. I've told that so many times, like...
That was the most surreal...
Yeah, the Yahtzee or Yanni?
Yangtze Hospital.
Yanni.
Yanni. No, you know what's funny is I recently rewatched The Big Lebowski, and there's the bit where the dude gets drugged, like the guy, he goes to this guy's house and he has the drink, and then he has this fantasy of like the bowling alley and there's like girls on the side. That hospital, and for the listener or viewer or both, we go in, and there was a new thing that I didn't know about, which was plastic surgery tourism or
Yeah. Cosmetic tourism.
Cosmetic tourism.
Cosmetic tourism.
I never heard that phrase in my life.
No, it's big on the Gold Coast.
Okay, so this was like the hospital, like the best hospital in Bangkok for all that stuff. And so what I distinctly remember is the girls all, it was almost like a manga cartoon of like they were all hot and they looked like they were 19 years old.
Fully.
In high skirts. They were like blue.
Pleated skirts.
Pleated skirts, like tennis skirts.
Fully.
Long, like the legs exposed. I think little pinkish tops, no, yellow tops, and they were all gliding around on the rollerblades, and that was the way of moving around the hospital.
There's a whole nother doco just on them.
That is so insane.
It's so fucking wild.
I've watched some Japanese porn because I spent time in Japan, and there are like Japanese porn fantasies that are exactly what we saw in that hospital, to the every last detail.
Unbelievable scenes, and the fact that we went through the whole. The other bit that's amazing that I think in the film, I don't know if I want to give away too much of it, but the morning that there's a reversal on wanting to do it, and everything that happened there, is it's kind of heart wrenching and really challenging to watch, even though we were there.
Yes,
and there's some real like a current affair-y type news. I could see, you can tell from back then that I'd done a lot of news just by the way that we kind of rolled on it. And I remember kind of looking at you, going to the room, and you're looking at me, and you're like, the unspoken, you're rolling, right?
Yeah.
Like, let's go and see what the fuck's about to go on inside this hotel room.
Absolutely.
Not knowing that shit would go down like that did, and then I don't know what there's the one shot after we find out that Westerly doesn't want to go through with it, and she's pulled the pin, and we're going back to the hotel where she's staying, and you clearly walk it. I remember that lunch. It was quiet.
Yes. No, it was so disappointing.
We just felt like we'd done our ass a bit.
I know, but the thing,
which is weird.
Yeah, but the thing that was great, and I think this is where, and this is probably like any documentary filmmaker would say this, is it's really exciting when you're so in it that you're. It was like we vicariously were let down. Like Westerly's disappointment was all of our disappointment.
It really was.
And I can say honestly, like, okay, there's the opportunist of the documentary filmmaker, and we were that, which is like, oh, the more dramatic the better, and this is great for the story, and you separate yourself, and it's almost, that can be like inhumane. How you can be looking at that, and it's very kind of cold and distant. We were so up close to it all. It was like Westerly's disappointment in herself was felt so deeply by us. And I remember just going, this whole thing is so sad right now.
It was so sad. And it definitely challenged me. It's just like trying to figure out, is this a hoax? Is this, what are we doing? What are we even fucking doing here? Like, this all seems too crazy.
Yes. No, I think about that time, Nick, and it was like, and I'm sure you would say the same, but it was like I've never been so in someone else's life in that way. I mean, maybe romantically, but not with like someone that you just you're their subject you're covering. Yeah,
totally. It's exciting to think that it's going to be watched by other people.
Yes.
Like, I just can't wait for other people to see it, and it's soon.
I know. I'm so excited, and I think, in some ways, in a way that I probably would not have said 5 or 7 years ago, because the thing just felt like it was like it was stuck. It was kind of paralyzed in some way. But I think I've had I've almost forgot we even did it. I almost resigned myself that this film's never going to see the light of day.
Me too.
And I think the thing that's nice now is, in a way, it was like the killing of the ego happened through that whole period too. And to now have it and not be so attached to it and be like, hey, I'm not trying to get in front of this, and I'm not trying to be the director dude that gets to claim, the co-director dude that gets to claim any part of it. It's more like, I just want you to see it because it's a slice of humanity that I think is really interesting.
Unbelievable. No, I hear you, and I'm the same, and I was thinking about that, like, even when it premieres down there, it's just going to be so nice to be in Byron, of all places, and for others and peers to see it.
Yes.
And like you said, some people are interested in coming, and oh damn, it's going to be cool.
Yeah, and I hope it expands. I mean, I think it sounds pompous to say, like, I hope it expands people's sort of perceptions of how crazy humanity can be, and how, like, identity and selfhood is such a like endless thing. But I do think I still will say, and I felt this early on, I think I walked away from the first lunch with Westerly in 2009 on the Gold Coast going, this is one of the most interesting people I've ever met. And I would still say that all these years later. Like, I don't know anyone that turns themselves inside out to such an extreme and is so... and not necessarily always verbally. It's not like someone who's able to directly share it, but just in their actions, and in the kind of digging deep into themselves, peeling away the layers into themselves, and what is meaningful and what matters. I've never met anyone who's taken me to such extremes of thinking of that.
I hear you. And just the challenging. It's been so challenging.
Yeah.
Anyway, I'm stoked, man. It's going to be cool. And so, where are you at now, Jamie?
Geographically, or am I literally?
Well, geographically, we're in Malibu, but I think personally, you seem like just amazing.
Yeah. Well, thanks.
You seem very
Nick.
happy.
Thank you, Nick. I feel really happy.
Awesome, man.
Yeah. My life is really good. I'm deeply in love. My girlfriend has twin 6-year-olds.
Amazing.
I'm writing a ton.
So good.
You know, it's funny because I think I focused a lot on my career, and I wouldn't even call it my career, but I focused a lot on writing and had a lot of ambitions in writing, and in that inevitably had a lot of disappointments and tried to, had an idea of how life was supposed to go, and then had it go elsewhere, or not hit the marks or not hit the heights.
Yeah.
But I also it's done this thing that I think this is probably very common for a lot of like middle-aged artists or people who devote themselves to something that they're doing that is hard to earn a living from and make work, which is just like getting back to just the deep love of doing it and being less results driven and hanging onto that. And so I have things I'm working on. I feel so incredibly grateful to write every day and to kind of like be in that creative space, and that feels really fun to me.
And do you think, like, with how you're feeling and how your mood is, does that affect the way that you write?
I think so. And I would say that for myself, and I've realized this, and it took time, it probably took some time for me to admit this and just to be made aware of it, but like, I don't have an Ivy League education. I graduated public high school, which was maybe not the best education, and then I started traveling a bunch as a surfer. And my roots are in surfing, and I grew up on the beach with a lot of fun-loving, uneducated folk. And so taking on writing as a lifelong vocation, I realize now is like quite ambitious. I mean, there's a thing that I've seen a lot of, which is, surfing, you write for surf magazines for a couple of years, and then you realize it's maybe not super lucrative, and then a lot of folks go elsewhere and do something else. Yeah. And I'm a lifer. Like, I'm in this, I know this is what I will do. I'll do variations, and I'll maybe work on films and do other things, but like the writing and the kind of creative part of it is something that I want to do forever. And so yeah, I think like I've had to find my way to just really figuring out how much I love it, and it has gone to this pure place. So yeah, I feel great.
So what? Yeah, you look good, man.
You too. Thank you.
We're sitting in the sun. Go check Malibu. Surf. Going to be hanging out in Australia soon. We're fucking pretty lucky, to be honest. That spot you've got up there is unreal.
I feel super lucky.
Yeah, you've been there for a little while, eh?
I've been there for about 3 years.
Oh, okay, not as long as I thought. Well, you're on a different place up there?
I was in Point Doom for many years, along with my roommate at the time, the house burned down in the Wolseley fire, 2018. Yep. Which was another fabulous.
Fuck, you've had an unbelievable run.
Well, when that happened, I was living in New York. There was a time when I was happily married and had an idea of like a family for myself, and I thought like I'm going to be a star writer and I'm going to have a family, and I had this idea of how things would work out, and it went elsewhere. And then so my wife died, and then I moved back here to kind of heal, and then I actually found my way into a really nice life. And then 5 years into it,
someone's having a rev.
Yeah. And then 5 years into it, my home burns down in this Wolseley fire, and I lose all my earthly possessions. And when it hit that point, I mean, look, there are way worse things. I could be serving a life sentence in prison, so that would be probably tougher than what I'm talking about here. But when that happened, I just kind of looked up and I was like, "You got a great sense of humor, motherfucker. This has gotten absurd." But there was a level of my home burning down where it was almost like I don't have the time or the years to grieve this thing because I've been grieving this.
You've
other
done
thing.
enough fucking.
And I was
grieving.
like, oh, you know what? I'm gonna have to like find a way to slither out of this and make jokes about it. So when people were like, "Oh my God, you lost your house and earthly possessions in the Woolsey Fire," I'm so sorry. The same way they were doing years before when my wife died.
Yeah.
I would be like, you know what? I'm a Buddhist by default. I don't need possessions. I don't care about them. And I was, of course, joking, but I also was partly like, I just need to like make this light because I did the victimhood thing for a long time.
It's exhausting.
It's exhausting.
You don't want to, and the last thing I'm sure, and you don't want people feeling sorry for you.
No, I know.
It fucking sucks.
I know. Well, you know, it's funny because I think for a while maybe I did, or maybe I just needed people to acknowledge that I'd gone through something, and maybe it was a way of making it real to myself that this has happened. But I've learned, and I've seen this because I do have many friends who are down on their luck and living out of cars or on the street. And the thing that I find, and I say this with total sympathy towards them, which I have, but it's also like often I will see a repeated victim narrative of this fucking thing happened to me and they did this and everything happened to them. And I realize now it's such a common thing, and it's not even about the external things that happen to you. It's about how you see them. And if you keep making the case for how bad people have been to you or bad circumstances have been for you, it doesn't help. It
doesn't help. And the opposite's true too, isn't it? Like if you're lighthearted and you can see a happy side to things, then you're just going to be happier, or you're going to get through it more, or good people are going to be one around you because at least you're kind of positive, which is kind of...
That's it. And then it's like a thing that gains momentum and snowballs. And
totally.
In recovery, the expression is fake it till you make it. Where it's like, just like take a shower, brush your teeth, put on clean clothes, and go out into the world and try to put a smile on your face, because that will attract the energy that you want versus staying in bed and not showering and not brushing your teeth and being miserable and then
that's the snowball.
Yes, that snowball's the worst.
Yeah.
And I feel like I've had my face in that enough to see a realization. At one point when I was like a fresh widower and I saw how the victim narrative was spinning in my head, and I really did feel like, why did this happen to me? And I started realizing every friend that I hung out with, my entire long story would be like how bad my life is, and it would be all about me, and I was sucking up all the air in the room in not a positive way, but in a negative way. And I thought, if I keep doing this, they're not going to want to go to dinner with me.
They're not going to have the energy.
They're not going to want to hang out, and then that's going to feed my victim narrative, and soon I will be living out of my car, and then I'm going to be ashamed of myself, and I'm going to see old friends that used to see me when I was in a better way, and I'm going to be embarrassed to be around them, so I'm going to hide from them so they don't see me, and get more and more alone and more down in the dumps. And so
in a lot of ways you're lucky.
Yes,
which is fucking wild.
Yeah. I feel that for sure, and I see that now.
Yeah, it's fucking crazy, man.
Yeah.
What inspires you now? Twin 6-year-olds.
Yeah, that's really fun. Yeah, being in love's really fun.
Oh, dude, that's
being
so
happy,
cool.
feeling that is great. I mean, it sounds so absolutely insanely cliche, but that having that is great because I've not had it a lot. And then I guess like when I was in my lowest lows and I was really into, if one thing helped me out, it was Pema Chodron, the writer, and she's done a bunch of books. She's a Buddhist. And there was in many ways, like I felt what I was learning is to be more grateful, which again, it sounds like such a cliche, but I think the thing that I got from it was just remaining curious. And I think like there's curiosity. On a good day, curiosity would be like being intellectually curious and reading a lot and exploring things.
Yep.
But on a far other extreme, when I was like, I'm not sure I want to be in the world, and I may at some point just cut out as quietly as I can. I remember thinking, but the one thing that we're sticking around for is the way the same way life surprised me in the worst possible way, my wife dying suddenly in a bicycling accident, it can also do the opposite, and some incredibly good news can sort of land in your lap when you least expect it. So the curiosity thing was like, well, maybe tomorrow will bring something that is actually great. And I think like that is inspiring. Just the way, I think that sometimes as you get older and you have lived decades on Earth and you are, imprisoned in this self more and more and more, and that I can speak for myself, I can be incredibly sick of myself, and just hearing myself right now talk, I'm just like, this is more fucking my bullshit.
I love it.
But what I do realize is that when you think you're locked into something, it can actually like completely go a different way, and that to me is inspiring.
It's been a life of curiosity.
Yeah.
For you.
Yeah.
The whole way.
So. Yep.
Mate, how are you feeling about the fact that the movie's coming out?
Absolutely thrilled.
Yeah.
Keeping the expectations low. But, the beautiful thing is, 5 years ago, as I said, I might be like, great, it's going to be fun to I don't think I actually ever thought this, but one might think it'd be cool to walk down the red carpet and be in a Q&A and sort of stand there in front of a film with Alan White and yourself and all of us who worked on the film and be like, we're proud of this thing. I'm so beyond that at this point.
Yeah.
I like that part of it, thankfully, has been sort of beaten out of me, for better or for worse.
Yep.
And now it's just like, hey, here's this thing, and it's the thing that, it's the movie, and it's what the conversation it starts or invokes that is, that's the thing it's more about that than like any part of glory of like the long trek and the fist in the air stuff. I'm not a fist in the air guy anymore.
No, I hear you.
I once was as a competitive surfer, but I'm suspicious of fists in the air. Double fist
But
pumps.
we've let it go, and fuck, maybe it's dare I say, now that we've let it go, it's just the perfect time for it to come out, and who knows?
Yeah.
Who knows? There's a little bit of my ego still sitting back there going, this could be something cool.
Yeah. Yeah, I hope so. And I also, and it's probably, you can relate to this, and it's probably a good thing for a good time to say this, is I'm so grateful to Westerly, Windina, Peter Druin for their bravery and for sharing so much and for kind of just flaying themselves open and allowing us to kind of look at everything, all the viscera
Literally
within.
exposed.
Yes.
The most exposed of any person I've ever seen.
Yeah, and I'm so grateful to them, to both Westerly and Peter, for sharing all that.
Me too. It's made me a better person in just being open, and just from the experience of the gnarliness of it.
For sure.
It's like, yeah, it's you can't even explain it until the movie comes out.
No, but I think, if in some naive way, behind speaking for myself, behind my own ambitions of like, oh, there's a great story, and the story might have many viewers, the thing you probably hope for underneath all that was like, oh, but I also want to be like the great photojournalists who I look up to, who sort of go live in foreign environments and come out and they're enlarged by that experience. I feel like we got that tenfold via Westerly Peter,
Totally.
Got so much of that, and that part of it's great.
Mate, any tips on podcasting for me?
I think if you just did it, which is making the person, your subject or your guest, feel really, really comfortable, because the more the conversation is rolling as if there were no cameras or audio equipment around, the better. And I think you're already a master at it because you've been doing this in various forms for so long.
Right.
But I think that's the thing I would say is you just want the conversation to feel like the listener is fly on the wall and the thing's rolling, and it's not like a public service announcement, or it's not part of some press release, and the agendas that people might have that start the thing, someone's promoting something or whatever, feel like it's not even a part of it.
That's it. And I'm just battling the imposter syndrome with the whole thing, and then just realizing I've been interviewing people for a long time.
Yep.
In one way or another.
Totally, but I have the imposter syndrome too, and I think sometimes the imposter syndrome can be fun. If you admit the imposter syndrome, what you'll often find is that probably the person you're talking to will say, I too have that.
Yep.
And then you're just like, we'll just imposter together. And it'll all work out.
Jamie, thanks so much, man.
No, thank you. Thank you, Nick.
You're one of my heroes, and I'm just so
Thanks.
lucky to have known you and done so much cool stuff with you and everything we're about to do in the future as well.
Thank you,
and
Nick.
I'd love to turn up here in Malibu off the fucking red eye and see you thriving.
Thanks, Nick. I'm so
It's the
thrilled,
best.
and the respect goes right back to you. And what cool experience we've had, and hopefully there'll be many more.
There will. Love you, man. Let's go check out the boo.
Yes, love you too.
Cool. Thanks, mate.
Thank you, Nick.
That's so good.
That go okay?
I think that was amazing.
How good is Jamie Brisick? Far out. So lucky to get him as my first talent in this Skegcast. Absolutely spoiled and learnt so much just about everything he's done in his life and about how shit I am at podcasting. Hopefully I can only get better. Thanks so much for watching and I'll see you soon.